So, welcome everybody. This is a webinar run by Play England. The idea of today is to be quite practical and think through issues around ensuring that children get to play. I think, firstly, in terms of etiquette, everybody is muted. Nicola is the control master and will decide if anyone is allowed to be unmuted. So as we go through, what I'm asking you to do is, if any questions occur to you as the speakers are speaking, if you could put your questions into the chat, we will ensure that we ask as many of those questions as we can. And we're also endeavouring to take any questions away so that we can do a follow-up and answer any questions that we didn't get to today, depending how the time goes. We are recording the session, so I hope you're all fine with that. Feel free to turn your video off if it worries you. That's so that we can make sure we don't miss anything when we're doing any sort of write-up or follow-up. So we wanted to do the session because, as you all know, we've just been through lockdown and been through various stages in relation to children's play during that time. At the beginning, there were lots of rumours that children were super spreaders and were very dangerous types of creatures and should definitely not be touched or seen. And we've moved on from that, which is good. And then we started to think about how people could control their children and keep them away from each other and keep them away from their friends and keep them away from outside. And there was a massive amount of online stuff that went out, which was really helpful to parents who were stuck at home with their children, but also stressed people out with a sort of avalanche of ideas of a wondrous play that people were meant to be providing for their children at home. And then we shifted to a focus on school. And there's been lots of discussion at that point about how children were being disadvantaged by not being allowed to go to school, and that was the thing that everything had to focus on. Around that time, there were some really amazing voices that came out and started talking about play and mental health and other issues that are important to children that aren't only about school. Helen is one of them. And there's been a steady build-up of concern really about the extremes of some children's experiences as we've been through this time. And we all know that COVID is brilliant at really shining a spotlight on any inequalities and disadvantages in our society, and everything seems to have been emphasized by the time that we've been through. So I think we were all excited to hear from the Prime Minister that we'd be back to some semblance of normal by Christmas, but I think that we're sort of feeling that might not be true now. And so with no end in sight, it's still really, really important for us to think about what's happening with the children. And there's lots of research coming out now about mental health, physical health, learning, happiness, family relationships, and all of those things impacting on children. So here at Play England, we think our job is to focus on play, and we love to work with all of you on thinking about issues around play. And we were particularly concerned as local lockdowns got stricter to think about whether local authorities in particular, but all of those making decisions about outside play spaces, might be under pressure and start to feel worried about keeping those spaces open. So that's where we got the idea for doing this webinar. And that's really what our emphasis is going to be on. We want a practical discussion aimed at those of you who are trying to keep those spaces open, trying to negotiate the tier rules and the guidance and your own insurance and all of those sorts of things, so that we can applaud you and support you and hopefully get some answers to some pretty practical questions along the way.